Now, that brain that you gave me, was it Hans Delbrück's?
No.
Would you mind telling me whose brain I did put in?
And you won't be angry?
I will not be angry.
Young Frankenstein wasn't just another Mel Brooks comedy. It was a resurrection, horror and parody, stitched together frame by frame until it felt alive.
Abby someone.
Abby who?
Abby Normal.
Abby Normal.
I'm almost sure that was the name.
Are you saying that I put an abnormal brain into a 7.5-foot long, 54-inch wide gorilla?
Brooks wanted no cameos, only shadows. Wilder demanded one number stay in even when the director hated it. And in the end, the studio almost pulled the plug over 3 simple words: black and white.
Is that what you're telling me? Quick, get him up!
What? 3 syllables, yes.
From hardware salvaged from the original 1931 Frankenstein to a cameo born on a tennis court, this movie teetered on chaos at every turn. Today, we're digging up 21 wild facts about young Frankenstein, and a bonus that stomps around in platform boots Mel Brooks wore to Hollywood dinners just to prove a point. 1. No Mel on camera by design. Mel Brooks had a habit of slipping himself into his movies. In Blazing Saddles, he played 3 characters, and in Spaceballs, he did the same. But Gene Wilder wouldn't let it happen in Young Frankenstein. Wilder believed if Brooks popped up in costume, even for a second, it would shatter the spell. This wasn't supposed to feel like parody. It was meant to feel like you'd stepped back into a universal monster picture. Brooks reluctantly agreed, staying behind the camera, but he couldn't resist entirely. His voice sneaks in as a howling wolf, a screeching cat, even the distant cry of a train. You never see him, but you hear him. Proof that even when Brooks pulled back, his fingerprints were everywhere. And that decision, strange as it was, gave the film the eerie sincerity that made its comedy land. Real Frankenstein hardware. Most parodies build fake sets, but Brooks and Wilder wanted something different: authenticity. They tracked down Kenneth Strickfaden, the man who designed the original Frankenstein lab equipment back in 1931. Unbelievably, he still had it. Tesla coils, switchboards, arcs of lightning stacked in his garage, gathering dust but still functional. When the crates arrived on set, it was like unearthing a time capsule. The coils sparked, the arcs fired, the board still hummed to life. Audiences didn't realize they were watching props with their own legacy, but the detail worked on a deeper level. The film didn't just parody Frankenstein, it resurrected it. That authenticity, tucked inside a comedy, blurred the line between spoof and sequel, making viewers forget they were watching a gag at all. The black and white ultimatum. The riskiest fight came before cameras even rolled. In the 1970s, black and white was box office poison. Studios wanted vibrant color, wide appeal, and easy marketing. Brooks, though, insisted Young Frankenstein had to be monochrome. It wasn't nostalgia, it was discipline. He threatened to walk if forced into color, and Wilder stood with him. The studio pushed back, offering bigger promotion budgets and even test reels. Brooks didn't budge. Finally, they caved, but with a condition. The marketing couldn't mention that it was in black and white. Audiences would have to discover it in the theater. Brooks agreed, and the result was gothic beauty that turned rebellion into timelessness. The shadows, the grain, the depth, it gave a comedy the look of a ghost story. And instead of sinking it, that choice helped make Young Frankenstein unforgettable. Brooks had won the battle for black and white, but behind the camera, casting was about to unravel. A role was locked, then lost, and a last-minute replacement would change the movie forever. Terry Garr wasn't the plan. In the early casting talks, Terry Garr's name wasn't even on the table. The studio had chosen someone else, a more serious actress with a classical edge, to play Inga. But friction behind the scenes changed everything. Script rewrites, tone disagreements, and scheduling conflicts cracked the plan wide open. Gene Wilder made a quiet suggestion: bring in Garr. She arrived without rehearsal polish or studio pressure, and from her first read-through, she slipped into the movie's rhythm like she'd always been there. Garr didn't treat Inga as a joke. She played her warm, playful, and in on the absurdity. Mel Brooks watched her read, sat in silence, then finally smiled. At that moment, it didn't matter who the studio wanted. Garr was the role. Puttin' on the Ritz wore. Few scenes define Young Frankenstein like puttin' on the Ritz. The tuxedos, the spotlight, the monster breaking into a Broadway routine. It's unforgettable. But Mel Brooks wanted it gone. He thought the gag broke the mood. Too long, too strange, too theatrical. Gene Wilder disagreed. He begged Brooks to keep it. swearing it would work. They argued for days, Brooks threatening to cut, Wilder holding the line. Finally, they shot it. And when Brooks saw the full performance in the costumes, music, the monster bellowing, "Puttin' on the Ritz," he laughed until he cried. He admitted it wasn't just funny, it was the best scene in the movie. A fight nearly killed it, but that fight gave comedy one of its strangest masterpieces. Gene Hackman's tennis court cameo. At the height of his dramatic career, Gene Hackman wasn't known for comedy. But one afternoon on a tennis court, he ran into Gene Wilder. Between volleys, Hackman confessed, "I want to try something funny." Wilder had the perfect idea, a blind hermit offering soup, wine, and cigars to the monster. Hackman filmed the entire role in one day. He played it with total sincerity, accidentally burning Peter Boyle's lap and smashing props in the process. The absurdity worked because Hackman never winked. He acted as though it were a tragedy. When the scene hit theaters, audiences roared, not just because it was funny, but because nobody expected an Oscar winner to show up and torch a monster's crotch. Casting surprises gave the film its heart, but once cameras rolled, chaos exploded. Props failed, costumes melted, and even the actors' own bodies turned into running gags. Cloris Leachman, lethal underplay. Most of Mel Brooks' comedies thrived on big performances, oversized, noisy, and manic. But Cloris Leachman went the opposite direction. As Frau Blucher, she delivered her lines with cold precision, clipped vowels, and an accent that sounded part Transylvania, part something unplaceable. It wasn't broad, it was sharp. So sharp that it cut straight through every scene. On set, it was lethal. Gene Wilder cracked midline. Terry Garr couldn't keep her face straight. Even the camera crew had to look away to stop shaking with laughter. Normally, Brooks would rein in a performance that broke the set. This time, he leaned in. Instead of telling Leachman to tone it down, he cut around the corpses of ruined takes and let her play it deadly serious. That restraint turned Frau Blucher into one of the most hauntingly funny characters in the entire film. The hump that migrates. It looked like a continuity mistake, but it was pure mischief. In one scene, Igor's hump is on the right side. Later, it's on the left. Then it vanishes, only to return again. Marty Feldman had decided, without telling anyone, to move it around just to see who noticed. The makeup team thought they'd applied it wrong. Brooks thought he was losing his mind. Finally, Feldman admitted it was intentional, a silent prank he wanted baked into the movie. Brooks laughed, then told the editors to leave it. No one in the film ever points it out. No character ever notices. It just happens quietly, like a private joke between Feldman and the audience. It was a rule breaker, but it fit the movie's strange rhythm so perfectly that it became one of its most beloved hidden gags. Peter Boyle's makeup ordeal. Under the lights, Peter Boyle looked every bit the stitched-together monster. But the transformation came at a cost. Each day he sat for hours as layers of latex and prosthetics glued to his skin, trapping heat underneath. Under the hot studio lamps, the makeup would begin to sag, beads of sweat running down his face as the scars threatened to slide out of place. Crews scrambled to patch him up, fanning him between takes, reapplying glue before the next shot. Boyle rarely complained. He sweated, stumbled, and danced in full tuxedo, turning physical misery into performance. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. The character was supposed to look uncomfortable in his own skin, and that's exactly how Boyle felt. What could have been a production nightmare became fuel for the monster's unforgettable presence. If Boyle's skin was melting, the set itself wasn't far behind. The storms, sparks, and floods that powered the laboratory didn't always stay under control. Torrential rain, real sparks. In an era before CGI, storms had to be built by hand. The crew of young Frankenstein rigged pipes to pour sheets of water, set up giant fans to whip the wind, and wired arcs of lightning through the borrowed 1931 lab gear. When they cranked it all up, the chaos was too convincing. Water pressure blew containment, sparks flew dangerously close to the crew, and the set threatened to drown in its own thunderstorm. For a few tense minutes, the shoot looked doomed. But overnight work dried the stage, and cameras rolled the next morning. What ended up on screen wasn't an effect. It was a real storm harnessed just long enough to become comedy history. Analog everything. Every effect in the film came from hands, wires, and light. Need thunder? They slammed metal sheets. Need fog? They piped it low with chilled vapor. Need music? They pulled cues from the same era as the Universal originals, not modern stock. Even the editing mimicked old Gothic technique. Iris wipes, long pans, high contrast close-ups. Brooks and Wilder refused to cut corners with modern tricks. They wanted young Frankenstein to look like a film that could have been made in 1935. That commitment fooled audiences, and in some cases even critics, into thinking they were watching an unearthed sequel. The authenticity wasn't an accident. It was built frame by frame. Brooks's invisible fingerprints. Mel Brooks promised Gene Wilder he'd stay out of sight. No cameo, no wink, no breaking the spell. But total silence wasn't in his nature. If you listen closely, Brooks is still there. The howl of a wolf in the distance? That's him. The screech of a cat during a transition? Him again. Even the shrill cry of a train was Brooks stepping behind the microphone. He never shows his face, but his fingerprints are scattered throughout the soundtrack like ghostly watermarks. It was a compromise. Wilder kept the movie serious, Brooks still got to play. And the result was a film that felt authentic, while still humming with its creator's mischief, hiding in plain earshot. But if Brooks stayed invisible, the studio didn't. They wanted their mark on the movie too, and the fight over the title nearly tore everything apart. Title fights. Gene Wilder loved the title Young Frankenstein. To him, it captured everything. The mix of heritage, irony, and strangeness. The studio hated it. Executives argued it sounded too slow, too literary, even confusing. At one point, they pushed for safer alternatives. Things like Frankenstein Returns or Son of Frankenstein, the comedy. Wilder wasn't having it. Calm most of the time, he surprised everyone by drawing a hard line. He told Mel Brooks, "If they change the title, I'm out." For once, Brooks didn't crack a joke. He backed Wilder completely. The fight dragged until the studio finally surrendered. The name stayed. Simple, odd, unforgettable, just like the movie itself. From Walk This Way to Aerosmith, it was a throwaway gag. Igor hands Dr. Frankenstein a cane and says,
"Walk this way,"
leading him off in a shared limp. Audiences laughed, but a band sitting in a recording studio laughed even harder. Aerosmith, struggling with lyrics for a new track, supposedly pulled their title straight from that gag. Steven Tyler later said he jotted the phrase down after seeing the movie. The band never confirmed all the details. Some accounts say the inspiration came later, but the timing was close enough to spark legend. Whether true or not, the joke walked off the screen and into rock history. Decades later, when Walk This Way blasted from speakers worldwide, fans couldn't help but think back to the humpbacked servant and his lopsided shuffle. Ratings, friction, PG intact. The film's innuendo was never subtle. From suggestive jokes in the lab to Elizabeth's breathless line in the climax. The humor flirted with boundaries. The ratings board noticed. They flagged certain lines as too risque, worried about tone and context. Brooks pushed back, arguing it was satire, not smut. After back and forth wrangling, the board relented, and the movie kept its PG rating. In the mid-1970s, that meant kids could buy a ticket, parents could laugh along, and the studio could relax. A single joke nearly tipped the scale, but instead of killing the fun, it gave Young Frankenstein one more reason to feel dangerous. A comedy skirting the edge of respectability. The fights with censors were tense, but money was the real gamble. Nobody thought a black and white monster comedy could make a dime until it crushed the box office. Box office monster. Studios had low expectations for Young Frankenstein, a black and white comedy in the 1970s. To them, it looked like financial suicide. Marketing was minimal, promotion lukewarm, and executives quietly assumed it would fade after a short run. Instead, audiences swarmed. Word of mouth spread, ticket sales multiplied, and by the time the dust settled, the film had grossed over $80 million on a budget of under $3 million. That made it one of the year's biggest hits, outpacing slicker, costlier productions, and shocking everyone who had written it off. What the studio saw as a gamble turned into a goldmine, and Brooks and Wilder proved that style, risk, and sheer weirdness could pay off bigger than anyone expected. So authentic people thought it was from the 30s. The film didn't just look like an homage, it fooled people. With its high-contrast shadows, period lenses, and borrowed lab equipment, Young Frankenstein passed for an authentic Gothic relic. Some older viewers swore they remembered it from their childhood, convinced they were seeing a re-release of a long-lost Universal film. Others asked if it was a forgotten sequel. Brooks never corrected them. He let the illusion stand because, in a way, that was the point. He and Wilder hadn't made a parody dressed up like Frankenstein. They'd made a Frankenstein movie that happened to be hilarious, and for audiences to mistake it for the real thing was the ultimate compliment. Critical canonization. Comedy often gets dismissed as light entertainment, but critics couldn't ignore this one. Young Frankenstein earned 2 Academy Award nominations, Best Adapted Screenplay and Best Sound. It lost both to The Towering Inferno, but the recognition was remarkable for a body monster spoof. Roger Ebert praised its discipline, noting that the black and white photography elevated the humor instead of cheapening it. Vincent Canby called it one of the year's funniest films. Decades later, review aggregators keep it near the top of comedy rankings with Rotten Tomatoes scores in the mid-90s. It may not have walked away with gold statues, but critical respect ensured the movie was never forgotten. Proof that parody, when executed with precision, can live alongside the very films it mocks. Critics gave it respect, but the ultimate honor came decades later, when the US government itself decided this monster comedy had to be preserved forever. National Film Registry, 2003. Most comedies don't get enshrined as cultural treasures, but in 2003, the Library of Congress announced that Young Frankenstein would be added to the National Film Registry. The honor is reserved for films deemed culturally, historically, or aesthetically significant. That put Brooks's monster parody in the same vault as Citizen Kane and The Godfather. For a movie built on gags about humps and horses, the recognition was staggering. But the reasoning was clear. The film had bridged eras, resurrecting 1930s horror with 1970s irreverence, and it still made audiences laugh decades later. Preservation wasn't just about protecting reels of film, it was about protecting memory. Gene Wilder didn't want it to end. On the last day of filming, the cast and crew felt the loss coming. Months of laughter, rewrites, and chaos had created something more than a movie. It was a family. Gene Wilder, in particular, dreaded the wrap. Mel Brooks later remembered that Wilder begged to keep filming, not because more scenes were needed, but because he didn't want to say goodbye. That bittersweet moment summed up the project. What started as a parody turned into something deeply personal. They weren't just mocking the past, they were making new memories that none of them wanted to leave behind. Musical afterlife and ongoing screenings. The movie didn't stay confined to 1974. In 2007, Brooks adapted Young Frankenstein into a Broadway musical, complete with tap dancing monsters and reimagined numbers. The stage version ran for over a year and later crossed the Atlantic to London. Meanwhile, the film itself never went away. Anniversary screenings, midnight revivals, and fan conventions kept it alive. On its 50th anniversary, theaters once again flickered with black and white lightning as new generations laughed at jokes older than their parents. The monster had been reanimated once more, not by science, but by fandom. And here's another fact that not everybody knows. The monster's platform boots were enormous, custom-made, heavy, and so awkward they threw Peter Boyle off balance during filming. After the shoot wrapped, Mel Brooks took them home, not as a keepsake, but as a statement. He clomped through Hollywood dinner parties wearing them, towering above guests, grinning when asked why. "They make me feel taller and funnier," he'd reply. The joke wasn't just on screen. Brooks carried it into real life, stomping through cocktail hours with the same mischief that powered his movies. But if you think this monster mash was chaotic, wait until you see the Hollywood meltdown we've lined up next. Click on the video right here to watch it. Drop a comment with the moment that still cracks you up, hit like if you enjoyed the ride, and subscribe so you don't miss the next untold story from Hollywood's strangest archives.